There are stories that defy all logic, that escape any rational explanation, and remain suspended in the air like unanswered questions. This is one of them. A story that began on an apparently normal night and ended up becoming one of the most disturbing mysteries that the small town of Villa Esperanza had ever known. It all happened on October 23rd, 2019, a date that would be forever burned into the collective memory of that town, located in the inland mountains, far from the big cities and their bustling rhythms. It was a place where everyone knew each other, where doors remained open, and where the word danger seemed to have no place in everyday vocabulary. Until that night, the Martinez family was exemplary. Roberto Martinez, 45 years old, worked as an agricultural engineer at the region's plantations. He was a methodical, responsible man, the kind who never missed an appointment or left a job half done. His wife, Elena, 42 years old, was an elementary school teacher at the town school. Everyone loved her for her infinite patience and perpetual smile that brightened even the grayest days. They had 4 children. Santiago, the eldest, had just turned 19 and was studying veterinary medicine at the capital's university, though that weekend he had returned home to celebrate his grandmother's birthday. Then came the twins, Marcos and Lucia, 16 years old, 2 inseparable teenagers who shared everything: friends, secrets, and even the same sarcastic sense of humor that sometimes exasperated their parents. And finally, there was Sophia, the youngest at 7 years old, a girl with enormous eyes and insatiable curiosity who saw the world as a magical place full of possibilities. The Martinez house was located on the outskirts of town, a spacious and welcoming construction surrounded by a garden where Elena grew roses and Roberto maintained a small vegetable patch. It was the kind of home where there was always laughter, music, and the smell of home cooking. A sanctuary of normalcy in an increasingly chaotic world. That afternoon of October 23rd, everything transpired as always. Roberto returned from work around 6 in the evening, tired but in good spirits. Elena had prepared baked chicken with potatoes, Santiago's favorite dish. The twins argued about which movie to watch after dinner, while Sophia played in the garden chasing butterflies until the sun began to set behind the mountains. The neighbor, Mrs. Gutierrez, a 70-year-old woman who lived in the adjacent house, would later remember that around 7 in the evening she saw the entire family gathered in the dining room through the window. They seemed happy, chatting animatedly. Nothing unusual, nothing that foreshadowed what was to come. They all dined together, as was customary in the Martinez household. Roberto presided over the table while telling anecdotes from work. Elena served generous portions while reminding her children that there were classes the next day and they couldn't go to bed too late. Santiago talked about his studies, excited about a research project on alpaca breeding. The twins, meanwhile, had managed to convince their parents to watch a horror movie after dinner. Sophia, the little one, barely ate. She was strangely quiet, which was unusual for her. Elena noticed that the girl was playing with the food on her plate, moving the potatoes from one side to the other without bringing them to her mouth. "Are you feeling okay, sweetie?" Elena asked, caressing her youngest daughter's head. Sophia looked up. Her large eyes seemed darker than normal, like 2 deep wells where light was lost. "There's someone in the garden," she said in a barely audible voice. Roberto laughed. "It's the shadows, princess. You know how the trees move with the wind." But Sophia shook her head firmly. "It's not the shadows. It's a person. They're standing next to the rose bush." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Santiago got up and approached the window, squinting to see better in the growing darkness outside. "There's nobody there, Sophie," he said with certainty. "You probably saw some animal." The girl didn't insist, but she didn't seem convinced either. She finished dinner in silence, with that distant expression that children sometimes have when they know something adults can't see. After dinner, they cleared the table together. It was a family ritual. Each one had their task. Santiago washed the dishes, the twins dried them, Roberto put everything away, and Elena cleaned the kitchen. Sophia, because of her age, only had to bring her own plate to the sink and then could go play. It was 8:30 at night when they finished. The sky was completely dark, and a strange fog was beginning to descend from the mountains, something unusual for that time of year. As the family settled in the living room to watch the movie, strange things began to happen. Small details that, seen in retrospect, took on a sinister meaning. First, it was the telephone. It rang twice, but when Roberto answered, there was only static on the other end of the line. The second time, there wasn't even static, just absolute silence, as if someone on the other end was holding their breath. "Must be a problem with the line," Roberto muttered, hanging up with a gesture of irritation. Then came the lights. They flickered 3 times, creating an unsettling atmosphere in the room. Elena joked that it was perfect for a horror movie, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Marcos was the first to notice something more disturbing. He had gotten up to get more popcorn when he saw something through the kitchen window. A silhouette. Someone was definitely standing in the garden, right where Sophia had said. "Dad," he called with a tense voice. "I think there's someone outside." This time Roberto didn't laugh. He got up quickly and turned on all the exterior lights. The garden was illuminated like a stage, but there was nobody. Only the rose bushes swayed their branches in the breeze and the fog that continued to thicken. "Must be nerves from a movie," Elena tried to joke, but everyone could feel that something wasn't right. The air itself seemed denser, heavier. Santiago proposed that they check the entire house to make sure doors and windows were properly closed. Roberto agreed. Together they went through each room, checking locks and bolts. Everything was in order. When they returned to the living room, Sophia was no longer watching a movie. She was standing by the window, staring fixedly outside. "What are you looking at, Sophie?" Elena asked, approaching her. "The trees are moving weird," the girl responded without taking her eyes off the garden. "They're moving, but there's no wind." And she was right. Elena noticed it immediately. The tree branches were swaying with strange, unnatural movements, as if something invisible was pushing them from different directions. But the air was completely still. A chill ran down Elena's spine. It was 10 o'clock at night when they decided it was time for Sophia to go to sleep. The girl protested a little, as always, but she was visibly tired. Elena accompanied her to her room, helped her put on her pajamas, and read her a story before turning off the light. "Mom," Sophia said just as Elena was about to leave, "can we leave the door open tonight?" "Of course, sweetheart," Elena replied, kissing her on the forehead. "And if you need anything, you just have to call us." Sophia nodded, but her eyes were still full of a worry that wasn't appropriate for her age. Elena returned to the living room, where the rest of the family continued watching the movie, though the tension was palpable. Roberto looked at his watch constantly, as if expecting something to happen at a specific time. Santiago checked his phone every few minutes. The twins had curled up together on the sofa, which was unusual considering they lately preferred to keep their distance to appear more independent. At 11 o'clock at night, the movie ended. Roberto yawned and announced it was time to go to sleep. Everyone agreed. They climbed the stairs as a group, as if instinctively seeking safety in numbers. Santiago retired to his old room, which now served primarily as a guest room. The twins went to their respective bedrooms, though Lucia left her door open, something she never did. Roberto and Elena entered their room, but first they stopped by Sophia's to verify she was asleep. The girl was breathing deeply, her small body curled up under the blankets. Her favorite teddy bear rested beside her. Everything seemed to be in order. "Good night, my love," Elena whispered, though she knew Sophia couldn't hear her. Those were the last normal words spoken in that house that night. Mrs. Gutierrez would later state that around midnight, she heard a strange sound coming from the Martinez house. She described it as a deep hum, almost imperceptible, that made the glass in her windows vibrate. It lasted barely a few seconds, and then everything fell silent. Absolute silence. So absolute it was unnatural. The crickets that normally filled the night with their song couldn't be heard. The neighborhood dogs that always barked at anything couldn't be heard. Not even the wind that whispered through the trees. Only silence. Mrs. Gutierrez looked out the window and saw that all the lights in the Martinez house were off, which was normal for that hour. But something in that silence produced a deep uneasiness in her. She remained awake for another hour, unable to explain why she felt so anxious. At 2 in the morning, she finally managed to fall asleep. Meanwhile, in the Martinez house, something was happening. Something that would defy all human understanding. There were no screams. There were no struggles. There were no signs of fighting. Simply, at some point between midnight and dawn, 6 people disappeared from their home as if the earth had swallowed them. Roberto, Elena, Santiago, Marcos, and Lucia all vanished without a trace. All except Sofia. October 24th dawned with a thick fog covering the entire town like a gray shroud. Mrs. Gutierrez woke early, as was her custom, and prepared her coffee while looking out the window toward her neighbor's house. It seemed strange to her that there was no movement at that hour. Elena always got up early to prepare breakfast before going to school. But the curtains remained closed and there was no light on. They must have decided to sleep a little longer, she thought, though something inside told her that wasn't normal. At 8 in the morning, when Elena should be leaving for work, the house was still completely silent. Mrs. Gutierrez began to worry seriously. She knew Elena well enough to know she was extremely punctual and responsible. She would never miss work without notice. She picked up the phone and dialed the Martinez number. The phone rang and rang, but nobody answered. At 9 in the morning, Mrs. Gutierrez made a decision. She put on her cardigan, left her house, and crossed the small garden that separated both properties. She rang the Martinez doorbell. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. She knocked on the door with her knuckles. Elena, Roberto, are you there? Silence was her only answer. A bad feeling invaded her. Using the key that Elena had given her years ago for emergencies, Mrs. Gutierrez opened the front door. The house was completely silent. The typical morning bustle of a large family couldn't be heard. There was no smell of coffee or breakfast, only a heavy and unnatural silence. "Hello," she called, her voice trembling slightly. "Is anyone home?" She advanced slowly down the hallway. Everything seemed to be in its place. There were no signs of disorder or violence. The shoes were lined up by the door. The coats hung on the coat rack. Roberto's car keys rested on the entrance plate. She climbed the stairs, feeling her heart beating faster and faster. One by one, she checked the rooms. Roberto and Elena's. The bed was made, clothes organized in the closet, but there was nobody. Santiago's, empty too. The twins, the same. When she reached Sophia's room, what she found left her paralyzed. The door to Sophia's room was ajar. Mrs. Gutierrez pushed it gently and entered. The room was intact, toys in their place, the bed rumpled as if someone had slept in it, the teddy bear thrown on the floor. But there was no trace of the girl. "Sophia?" she called, now with real panic in her voice. "Little one, are you here?" A weak sound coming from the closet made her turn abruptly. She approached with her heart in her throat and opened the closet doors. There, curled up among the dresses and shoes, was Sophia. The girl was alive, but her condition was disturbing. Her eyes were wide open, staring fixedly ahead without blinking. Her body was rigid, as if she were in a state of shock. She didn't react when Mrs. Gutierrez called her by name. "Sophia, Sophia, sweetheart, it's me, Mrs. Gutierrez." The woman extended her hands to touch the girl, but at that moment Sophia emitted a sound that froze the old woman's blood. It wasn't a scream nor a cry. It was a low, guttural moan like an injured animal would make. "No," Sophia whispered in a barely audible voice. "Don't wake them. If you wake them, they'll come back." Mrs. Gutierrez didn't understand what the girl meant, but the tone of absolute terror in her voice convinced her not to ask questions. With trembling hands, she took out her phone and dialed the emergency number. "I need help. It's urgent. At the Martinez house, at 237 Las Flores Street. The family has disappeared. Only the little girl is here, and something's not right. Please come quickly." The police arrived in less than 20 minutes. 2 patrol cars stopped in front of the Martinez house, their blue and red lights cutting through the morning fog like neon knives. Officer Ramirez, a middle-aged man with 20 years of experience on the force, was the first to enter. What he found deeply disconcerted him. The house was impeccable. There were no signs of struggle, robbery, or violence of any kind. Valuable belongings were in their place. The television, computers, Elena's jewelry in her jewelry box. The doors and windows were closed from the inside. There were no forced entry points. It was as if the 5 adult members of the family had simply evaporated. Officer Ramirez and his partner, Officer Torres, found Mrs. Gutierrez in Sophia's room, trying to console the girl who remained curled up in the closet. The little one hadn't said anything more since her cryptic warning about waking them. "Sophia," Officer Ramirez said in a soft voice, kneeling in front of the closet, "I'm Officer Ramirez. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me what happened last night?" The girl didn't respond. Her eyes remained fixed on some invisible point, as if she were seeing something nobody else could perceive. "Where are your parents, Sophia, and your siblings?" Silence. Officer Torres decided to try a different approach. "Are you hungry, little one? Thirsty? We can bring you something." For the first time, Sophia reacted. She moved her head slightly, and her lips moved, though her voice was so low it could barely be heard. "I can't leave. They're waiting." "Who's waiting?" Ramirez asked, feeling a chill run down his back. "The ones who took my family," Sophia replied, and a solitary tear rolled down her cheek. "They're still here. I can feel them." By 11 in the morning, the Martinez house had become a crime scene, though technically there was no evidence that any crime had been committed. Forensic teams combed through every inch of the property looking for clues, any indication of what could have happened. They found nothing. There were no strange footprints. There were no traces of blood. There were no unknown fibers or hairs from people outside the family. The locks were intact. The alarm system, though simple, hadn't been activated during the night, which suggested the Martinez family hadn't felt any threat. Detective Mendoza, an experienced investigator transferred from the capital to take charge of the case, supervised operations with growing frustration. In his 30 years of career, he had seen everything: murders, kidnappings, disappearances. But never anything like this. 5 people couldn't simply vanish in a thin air without leaving a trace. While the forensics worked, Sophia was taken to the local hospital for a complete medical examination. The doctors found nothing physically wrong with her. She had no injuries, showed no signs of abuse or mistreatment, and her vital signs were normal. However, her psychological state was another story. The girl remained in a state of almost total mutism, responding only with monosyllables when asked direct questions. Her eyes had that lost look of someone who had witnessed something traumatic, something her child's mind couldn't process. Dr. Sylvia Roman, a child psychiatrist, was called to evaluate Sophia. After 2 hours trying to establish contact with the girl, the doctor came out of the room with a worried expression. "She's in a state of severe shock," she informed Detective Mendoza. "Whatever she witnessed last night has traumatized her deeply. She'll need intensive therapy and a lot of time to recover, if she recovers." "Did she say anything useful?" Mendoza asked, knowing the answer would probably be negative. The doctor hesitated. "She said something strange. When I asked her if she remembered what happened to her family, she said, 'The fog took them. The fog that has eyes.'" Mendoza frowned. "The fog that has eyes. Do you think it's a metaphor for something?" "It's possible. Traumatized children often use symbolic language to describe events they can't process literally. But it could also be that she saw something in the darkness, and her child's mind interpreted it as fog. Or it could be a hallucination caused by the trauma. Or could she be telling the truth as she perceives it?" Mendoza suggested. The doctor looked at him with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. "Detective, I know your job involves considering all possibilities, but I assure you that fogs don't have eyes, nor do they take people away." Mendoza nodded, but in his mind, he was already reviewing the weather report from the previous night. Indeed, there had been unusually dense fog. But fog was fog, wasn't it? During the following days, Detective Mendoza and his team interviewed all of the Martinez family's neighbors. What they discovered was disturbing in its consistency. Several neighbors had noticed the strange fog that night. Don Fernando, who lived 3 houses down, said he had gone out to walk his dog around 11:30, and the fog was so thick he could barely see his own hands. "But the strange thing," he said, scratching his head, "is that the fog wasn't everywhere. It was as if it concentrated specifically around the Martinez house. And there was something else. My dogs refused to approach. Normally they're curious, but that night they stayed glued to my side, trembling. Another neighbor, young Monica Reyes, told a similar experience. I was returning late from work. It must have been close to midnight. When I passed by the Martinez house, I felt something weird, like someone was watching me. I looked toward the house, and I swear I saw, well, this is going to sound crazy, but I saw shapes moving in the fog. They weren't human. They were, I don't know how to describe it, tall, thin, and they moved fluidly as if they were floating. Why didn't you report this? Mendoza asked. Monica looked down, embarrassed. Because I thought I was seeing things. It had been a long day. I was tired. I thought it was my imagination playing a bad trick on me. But the most disturbing testimony came from Mr. Castillo, an elderly man who suffered from insomnia and spent his nights looking out the window. He lived directly across from the Martinez family and had a clear view of their house. I saw when the lights went out, he said with a trembling voice. It must have been 11:30, maybe a little later. The house was completely dark. But then the fog began. I had never seen anything like it. It crawled along the ground as if it were alive, as if it had purpose. It concentrated around the house, enveloped it completely. And inside the fog, there were lights. Lights, Mendoza repeated, taking notes furiously. Yes, like bright eyes. Dozens of them, moving in the fog. At first I thought they were fireflies, but fireflies don't shine that color. These were blue, an unnatural blue, like electricity, and they were all heading toward the Martinez house. The old man stopped, his hands trembling as he held his cup of tea. I wanted to get up, I wanted to call someone, but I couldn't move. It was as if I were paralyzed. I could only observe. The fog with its blue lights completely enveloped the house for, I don't know, 10 minutes? 20? I lost track of time. And then, suddenly, it disappeared. The fog left as quickly as it had arrived, and the lights went out. And what did you do then? Mendoza asked. I stayed looking at the house for hours. I didn't see any movement, no lights turning on. It was as if the house were empty, dead. And I knew, deep in my being, that something terrible had happened. The case of the Martinez family's disappearance quickly became national news. The media descended on Villa Esperanza like vultures, looking for any morbid detail they could exploit. Theories abounded, each more elaborate than the last. Some believed Roberto Martinez had been involved in shady business, and that the family had been kidnapped by drug traffickers or organized criminals. But this theory quickly crumbled when financial investigations showed that the Martinez family was middle class with no significant debts or connections to illegal activities. Others speculated it was a crime of passion, that perhaps Roberto or Elena had had an extramarital affair that had ended in tragedy. But again, investigations revealed nothing. Both parents were known for their mutual devotion and dedication to their children. Testimonies from friends and family painted a portrait of a solid and happy marriage. There were even those who suggested the family had planned their own disappearance, that they had wanted to start a new life elsewhere, leaving Sofia behind. But this theory was absurd on multiple levels. What parents would abandon their youngest daughter? And how would they have managed to disappear without leaving traces in bank accounts, credit cards, or security cameras? No, there had to be another explanation. Detective Mendoza focused on the practical aspects of the investigation. He reviewed all security cameras within a 3-kilometer radius around the house. None showed suspicious vehicles or unusual movements during the night of October 23rd. He interrogated acquaintances, co-workers, distant relatives. Everyone expressed shock and sadness, but nobody could offer an explanation. Tracking dogs were brought in to follow the trail of the disappeared. The animals found the scents of each family member throughout the house, especially in their respective rooms. But when they tried to follow the trail outside the house, the dogs behaved strangely. They refused to go out to the garden. They barked, whimpered, threw themselves on the ground. One of the most experienced dogs, a German shepherd named Rex, who had participated in dozens of successful searches, simply sat at the back door and howled as if he had lost his best friend. I've never seen anything like this, admitted his handler, a veteran with 20 years of experience. It's as if there's something out there that terrifies them. But I don't see anything. Analysis of the garden revealed nothing useful. There were no footprints, no signs of struggle. The earth was intact, the grass undisturbed. It was as if nobody had left the house, which posed a terrifying question. If nobody had left, where was everyone? A week after the disappearance, Sophia finally began to speak more. Not much, and certainly not with complete coherence, but something was better than nothing. Dr. Roman worked with her daily, using play therapy techniques to help the girl process what she had experienced. During one of these sessions, Sophia made a drawing that would freeze the blood of anyone who saw it. She drew her house, recognizable by the rose bushes in the garden that her mother loved so much. But around the house, she had drawn what appeared to be clouds or fog, dark gray in color. And inside those clouds, she had drawn blue circles, dozens of them. When Dr. Roman asked her what those circles were, Sophia looked at her with those enormous, haunted eyes and whispered, "Eyes. They were watching us." Dr. Roman felt a chill run through her body. She had worked with traumatized children for 15 years, but there was something in Sophia's tone, in the certainty with which she spoke, that made her believe the girl was telling the literal truth. "Sophia," the doctor said softly, sitting beside the girl, "can you tell me more about these eyes? Who do they belong to?" The girl was quiet for a long moment, her small fingers nervously playing with the edge of her drawing. When she finally spoke, her voice was so low that Dr. Roman had to lean in to hear her. "They weren't people. They were visitors. That's what they called themselves when they spoke in my head." "They spoke in your head?" Dr. Roman made notes, trying to maintain a professional expression despite the growing unease she felt. Sophia nodded. "They said they had been watching us for a long time. Watching many families. They choose the ones that shine brightest." "Shine?" "Yes. Mom always said our family was special, that we loved each other a lot. The visitors said that's what attracted them. Love. It shines like a light they can see from far away." Dr. Roman swallowed hard. "And what did these visitors want, Sophia?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. "They want to take them. They said that in their world, families like ours don't exist anymore. That they lost the ability to feel, to love. And they collect families that still have that light. They keep them. Keep them where? I don't know. Somewhere else. A place between the fog and the stars. That's what they showed me when they looked at me. Why didn't they take you too?" A tear rolled down Sophia's cheek. "They tried, but I hid in the closet and closed my eyes very tight. Mom had told me once that if I was ever very scared, I should think of happy things and close my eyes. So I did. I thought about all of us together, about birthday parties, about when Dad taught me to ride a bike. And I sang the lullaby Mom always sang to me, but only in my head, so they wouldn't hear." She paused, her small body shaking with sobs. "When I finally opened my eyes, it was morning. The fog was gone, and so was my family." 2 weeks after the disappearance, Detective Mendoza received a call that would change the direction of his investigation forever. It was from Dr. Patricia Vega, an anthropologist specializing in local legends and folklore from the State University. "Detective," Dr. Vega's voice sounded urgent on the phone. "I've been following the Martinez case in the media. I believe I may have information that could be relevant." Mendoza, desperate for any lead, agreed to meet with her that same afternoon. Dr. Vega arrived at the police station with an old leather briefcase full of documents, books, and yellowed newspapers. She was a woman of about 50, with gray hair pulled back in a bun and intelligent eyes that sparkled with a mixture of excitement and concern. "I know this will sound strange, Detective," she began, spreading papers on the table in Mendoza's office. "But what happened to the Martinez family is not an isolated event." Mendoza leaned forward, interested. "What do you mean?" "I've been researching local legends for 20 years, and there's a pattern. Every 50 to 70 years, in different parts of this region, entire families disappear without a trace. Always in October, always during foggy nights, and always, one member of the family is left behind, usually the youngest." She pulled out a newspaper from 1952. The headline read, "Family of 5 disappears in San Miguel. Only baby daughter found." Then another from 1897, mysterious disappearance in Valle Verde, young child the sole survivor. And another from 1823, entire family vanishes during strange night, infant discovered alone. Mendoza felt his mouth go dry. This can't be a coincidence. It's not, Dr. Vega said firmly. And there's more. I managed to track down some of the survivors from previous disappearances, those who are still alive or whose testimonies were recorded. She pulled out a tattered notebook. In 1952, the surviving baby grew up and, as an adult, gave an interview to a local journalist. She said she remembered lights in the fog and voices that weren't voices. In 1897, the surviving child, when she was an old woman, wrote in her diary about beings made of mist that came for her family. But why? Mendoza asked, feeling as if he were losing his grip on reality. Why would these things take families? Dr. Vega pulled out an even older book, its pages brown with age. This is a compilation of indigenous legends from the region, collected by a Jesuit missionary in the 18th century. According to these legends, before the Spanish arrived, the native people of these mountains spoke of the collectors. The collectors? Entities that don't belong to our world. According to legend, they exist in a parallel dimension, a place where emotions and feelings have been lost over millennia. These beings can no longer feel love, joy, or connection, so they collect it. They take families from our world to sustain themselves, to feed on the emotional energy that emanates from human bonds. Mendoza shook his head, struggling to process what he was hearing. Dr. Vega, with all due respect, this sounds like fantasy? Like madness? Dr. Vega interrupted, her eyes intense. I know, I was also a skeptic, but then I started connecting the dots. The fog that appears out of nowhere. The blue lights witnesses describe. The absolute lack of physical evidence. The surviving children who all describe the same thing. Eyes in the fog, voices in their heads, the feeling of being watched by something that isn't human. She leaned forward. Detective, I don't believe in ghosts or monsters. I'm a scientist, but I also believe that there are things in this universe that we don't understand yet. Things that exist in dimensions or planes of reality that our science hasn't discovered how to measure or detect. Mendoza was silent for a long moment. Everything in him, his training, his experience, his rationality, told him this was absurd. But he couldn't ignore the evidence before his eyes. The pattern was too clear. The similarities too exact. If what you're saying is true, he finally said, then the Martinez family is gone. Dr. Vega finished sadly, taken to a place we can't reach. At least not with our current understanding of reality. And Sophia? She's lucky to be alive. According to the pattern, the collectors always leave one behind. Usually the youngest, the most innocent. Perhaps because children have a purity, an ability to resist that adults have lost. Or perhaps, she paused, perhaps they need someone to stay, someone to remember. Someone to ensure the legend continues, so that in another 50 or 70 years, they can return. That night, Mendoza couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind spinning around everything Dr. Vega had told him. Part of him wanted to dismiss it all as the ramblings of an obsessed academic. But another part, the part that had seen Sophia's eyes, that felt the wrongness in the Martinez house, that had read Mr. Castillo's testimony about the lights in the fog, that part knew there was truth in Dr. Vega's words. Around 3 in the morning, his phone rang. It was Officer Ramirez, his voice urgent and frightened. Detective, you need to come. Now, it's a Martinez house. What happened? Mendoza asked, already getting dressed. The fog is back. Mendoza arrived at the Martinez house 15 minutes later. What he saw left him frozen. The house was once again enveloped in that unnatural fog, dense and gray, that seemed to pulse with its own life. And inside the fog, just as Mr. Castillo had described, there were lights. Dozens of blue lights, like electric eyes, moving in slow, deliberate circles around the property. A crowd of neighbors had gathered at a safe distance, watching in terrified silence. Officer Ramirez approached Mendoza, his face pale. "It started about 20 minutes ago," he said, his voice shaking. "The fog just appeared, out of nowhere. And then the lights." "Where's Sophia?" Mendoza asked suddenly, a jolt of panic running through him. "At the hospital. She's safe." Mendoza felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived, because at that moment, something changed. The lights in the fog began to move faster, more frantically, and then, from inside the house, a sound emerged. It wasn't a human sound. It was a vibration, a resonance that Mendoza felt in his bones more than heard with his ears. And then he saw them. They weren't exactly solid. They weren't exactly transparent. There was something in between, figures that seemed to be made of the fog itself, but with defined shapes. Tall, impossibly tall, with elongated limbs and bodies that defied normal proportions. And their eyes were those blue lights, glowing with an intelligence that was utterly alien. There were 5 of them. Or rather, there had been 5 of them. But now they were different. Changed. Mendoza looked more closely, his heart pounding. And then he understood. The figures weren't just made of fog. They had absorbed something. Features. Human characteristics. One of them had Roberto's posture, his way of standing. Another moved with Elena's grace. He could see traces of Santiago, Marcos, and Lucia in the others. The collectors had taken the Martinez family and, somehow, incorporated them. They were wearing them like suits, feeding on their essence, their emotions, their humanity. One of the figures turned its head toward Mendoza, its blue eyes fixed on him, and for a moment, just a moment, Mendoza thought he saw something behind those alien eyes. A flash of recognition, of pleading. Elena. Part of her was still there, trapped inside that thing. And then, as quickly as they had appeared, the figures and the fog vanished. One moment they were there, the next the night was clear and cold, with stars shining overhead as if nothing had happened. The crowd stood in shocked silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody knew what to say. Mendoza fell to his knees, trembling. He had seen it. He had seen the impossible. And now he knew, with absolute certainty, that the Martinez family was lost forever. The official investigation was closed 3 months later. The official conclusion was that the family had disappeared under unknown circumstances, possibly victims of an organized crime group that had managed to leave no trace. It was an unsatisfying conclusion, but it was the only one the authorities could offer. Sophia was placed with her maternal grandmother, who lived in another city far from Villa Esperanza. Dr. Roman continued working with her, and slowly, very slowly, the girl began to heal. But she would never be the same. How could she be? Detective Mendoza requested a transfer. He couldn't stay in Villa Esperanza, couldn't pass by the Martinez house without feeling that crushing weight of helplessness. He had solved hundreds of cases in his career, had brought justice to countless families. But this time he had failed, not because of lack of skill or effort, but because the enemy was something beyond human comprehension. Before leaving, he visited Sophia one last time at her grandmother's house. The girl was in the garden, drawing, always drawing. It was how she processed her trauma, Dr. Roman had explained. "Hello, Sophia," Mendoza said softly, sitting beside her. The girl looked up at him and smiled slightly. "Hello, detective. Are you leaving?" "Yes. I'm going to work in another city." "That's good. This place has too many sad memories." Mendoza looked at her drawing. It was of a family, mother, father, 3 older siblings, and a little girl. They were all holding hands, smiling. But around them, drawn in light blue pencil, were faint circles. Eyes. "They're still watching," Sophia said quietly, following his gaze. "The visitors. I can feel them sometimes, especially at night. They're disappointed they couldn't take me." "Are you scared?" Mendoza asked. Sophia thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But Grandma says that fear is okay, that it helps us be careful. And Dr. Roman taught me techniques to calm down when I'm scared." She looked at Mendoza with those enormous eyes that had seen too much for her age. "Detective, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think my family is suffering?" "Wherever they are." Mendoza felt his throat tighten. He wanted to lie, to tell her everything was fine, but he respected her too much for that. I don't know, Sophia. I honestly don't know. But I want to believe that wherever they are, they're together. And as long as they're together, they have each other. Sophia nodded slowly. I want to believe that too. That's what I tell myself every night before I sleep. That they're together, and that maybe in that strange place they can still feel the love that connected us. Because that's what the collectors wanted, right? Our love. So maybe my family still has that. Mendoza had to look away to hide his tears. 2 years later, Dr. Patricia Vega published a book titled The Collectors, a multidimensional phenomenon in the Andes Mountains. It was dismissed by the academic community as pseudoscience, as the ramblings of a respected scholar who had lost her way. But in Villa Esperanza and in other small towns in the region, people read the book and recognized the truth in its pages. They began to lock their doors more carefully on foggy October nights. They taught their children to hide if they ever saw blue lights in the mist. They learned to be more careful about how brightly their love shone, because the collectors were still out there, watching, waiting, and in another 50 years, or 60, or 70, they would return. They always did. 5 years after the disappearance, Sophia, now 12 years old, woke up one October night with her heart racing. She had dreamed of her family. They were walking in a place made entirely of gray mist, but they were smiling. They were together. She got up and went to the window. Outside, the night was clear, the stars bright. No fog, no blue lights. But as she was about to return to bed, she saw something that made her freeze. On the windowsill, someone had left a single white rose. Her mother's favorite flower. Sophia picked it up with trembling hands. It was real, fresh, covered with morning dew even though it was the middle of the night. And attached to the stem was a small note, written in handwriting she would recognize anywhere. Her mother's handwriting. The note said only 3 words. "We love you." Sophia clutched the rose to her chest and cried. They were tears of sadness, yes, but also of relief, of hope, because now she knew her family was still out there, still together, still connected by the love that the collectors had taken but couldn't destroy. And somehow, from that impossible place between dimensions, they had found a way to tell her they were okay. It wasn't the ending Sophia wanted. She wanted her family back, wanted to hear her mother's laugh and feel her father's hugs, wanted to argue with the twins and talk about veterinary medicine with Santiago. But it was the ending she got, and in time, she learned to live with it. Because love, true love, doesn't end when people disappear. It doesn't end when they're taken to another dimension by beings made of fog and starlight. Love transcends space and time and reality itself. The collectors had learned that in their own way. They had sought to collect and consume love, but what they discovered was that love cannot be possessed. It can only be shared. And somewhere in that gray place between worlds, the Martinez family continued to love each other. And that love, that bright and beautiful love, reached across the impossible distance to let a little girl know that she was not and would never be alone. The house at 237 Las Flores Street in Villa Esperanza was never occupied again. It stood empty, a silent monument to the family that had once filled it with laughter and life. Sometimes, on foggy October nights, neighbors claimed to see lights in the windows. Not the blue lights of the collectors, but warm, yellow lights. The kind of lights that come from a family gathered around the dinner table, sharing a meal and stories and love. And sometimes, very rarely, people walking past the house on those foggy nights would hear something that made them pause and smile through their tears. The sound of a family, laughing, because some bonds are stronger than reality itself. Some love burns so bright that not even beings from another dimension can extinguish it. The Martinez family was gone, but they were not lost. They were somewhere else, somewhere beyond, still together, still a family, still love.